Galang Guru Windawu. We at Chronic Pain Australia and our speakers acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands on which we meet across our beautiful country. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and coming to you from the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara peoples, the warmest welcome to our community of chronic pain warriors and carers, and our deepest thanks to the speakers who meet with us today. My name's Nicolette Ellis and I'm President of Chronic Pain Australia, and it's my absolute honour to be hosting today's session. This session, as voted by our community, is about new horizons and innovations in pain management, and it's brought to you by an unrestricted educational grant from Promethean BioPharma. As I said, our community previously voted on this, and this was to see if there was any new treatments that were currently available for chronic pain management, or any new treatments that were very close on the horizon, because we usually hear about research that might be, about 5 to 7 to 10 years away. Our first speaker today is Peter Comerford, and he is the CEO of Promethean BioPharma. He has over 20 years of experience in healthcare, hospitals, pharmacy, pharmaceutical manufacturing and aged care. And as someone who lives with chronic pain, he's dedicated to improving the accessibility and affordability of pain management treatments for people living with chronic pain. The warmest welcome to Peter, and he's got some really exciting and innovations that are coming hopefully very soon to our community.
Thank you, Nicola. Can you hear me clearly? All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening and for tuning in. It's a privilege to be able to speak to you. And yes, we do have something nice, innovative, and not too far away. So one of the concerns that I have as a sufferer of pain is that the war on opioids has impacted on anyone who is suffering pain. And while there is evidence of how we should be very careful about our use of opioids, the problems in other countries with controlling opioids have meant that it's become a taboo subject. And that taboo subject has meant that people are being withdrawn from opioids, probably in a very blank canvas way, without anything that innovates and that allows a replacement therapy. And the objective of any therapy in these situations, as most of us know, is to keep us active and keep us living well and keep us exercising if possible. The standard treatment for pain is 30 minutes walking per day and 3 to 4 times weightlifting per week. And an awful lot of us can't get to do that. So one of the substances, one of the drugs that are available to us is cannabis. However, with all of the money that's been pumped into cannabis over the last years, none of it has been pumped into clinical trials that yielded anything that could be registered as a drug for pain. We have got a registration for epilepsy. We have got a registration for muscle spasm in multiple sclerosis. But unfortunately, those are such small populations, important but small. And those registrations, because of the way the clinical trials were run, those registrations are extremely restricted. So doctors are not allowed to prescribe off-label for either of those drugs. So there was a problem. And having a background in engineering and a lot of engineers working for me, we don't like seeing problems without solutions. The solution for us was to find a way of creating a clinical trial that does address pain. And anyone who works in the pharmaceutical manufacturing industry and the pharmaceutical industry in general will know that one clinical trial is never enough. There has to be a pipeline. There has to be a series of clinical trials that can be worked through. So you will have heard earlier in the week, and you will have read in the media, you will have seen on social media, all sorts of trials around medical cannabis, but they're observational trials. They're small trials. They're not randomized, not placebo-controlled, so not suitable for registration. Uniquely, the TGA in Australia has created a framework to allow for over-the-counter registration of a cannabis product. And they did this back in 2020. And they said, we've done research and found that CBD is perfectly safe for adults up to a certain dosage. And if anyone can prove that CBD works for anything, they will allow and consider that product for registration based on the merits of the clinical trial that's been run. Now, unfortunately, a number of trials have been run for things like sleep or anxiety, and sleep is a very difficult thing to prove, and anxiety is not allowed as an over-the-counter medication. So the only avenue we saw open to us was pain. So we're running currently. We've started dosing patients about 2 weeks ago. We're currently running a double-blinded, randomized, placebo-controlled trial for mild to moderate pain with CBD tablets. Now, one of the other problems with CBD is its low bioavailability. So it is a big fatty molecule, and the body doesn't like big fatty molecules and tries to get rid of them as quickly as possible, which makes it very difficult because the body is eliminating 92% of the CBD that you take into your body. So if you take oil and put it into your body, if you take capsules, 92% of what you take is gone. And that makes it very hard to meet the legal framework requirements that the TGA have set. So we've designed a trial using a science of encapsulation, breaking down the size of the molecule of CBD and encapsulating it into small parcels and making that available in the body, which means that instead of wasting 92% of it, you waste maybe 40%. So massively increasing the effective dose that the patient receives while still staying within TGA's guidelines. And because the trial has 172 participants, 2 arms, one is placebo, one is active. Nobody knows which one they're receiving. The doctor doesn't know whether it's active or placebo. Patient doesn't know if it's active or placebo. The results will represent class 1 medical evidence. So that, if we're successful, will allow us to go to the TGA and say we would like to register this drug. The trial is due to finish in December of this year, and over-the-counter registration takes between 6 and 9 months. So hopefully before the end of next year, we're looking at a CBD medication that can be bought over the counter from a pharmacist, no prescription involved, that addresses mild to moderate pain. Our objective in the trial is to move the dial on pain down from a score of 6 to 4, or 5 to 3, or 4 to 2, or possibly even, with a change that we've made recently, from 3 to 1. Now, going from 3 to 1 is very hard. And a lot of people out there are probably saying, but my pain level is 7. The reason I say, interestingly, we have to have level 3 pain in there is because the participants, when they started using the screening tool that we're using, it is so advanced, so evidence-based, so accurate in how it measures and how comprehensively it gets around people's biases, that a lot of the people who thought they were in 7 and 8 pain are finding themselves to be in 4 or 3.8 or 3.7. Because it's the first time that the pain has been objectively measured with an evidence-based tool. Because normally, my doctor says to me, what's your pain like? Out of scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the worst pain you've ever been in. But actually, that's not what 10 means. 10 means you're almost dead. You are incapable of communication, can't even recognize that somebody has walked into a room, and you will be dead shortly. 9 is the next level down from that. 7 is horrific, and moderate pain is 4 to 6. Mild pain is 1 to 3. So we're hoping that with the results that we're seeing so far, we will be able to register this medicine. We've been a bit cute about how we've done it. So we've built in what's called an interim measurement point into our trial. So when we've got 30 people through the placebo and 30 people through the active, we'll stop and measure. And if at that stage we're not getting the results we need, if the variance is not big enough between active and placebo, or between the pain levels that we're seeing reduced, then we just add more people to the trial. It's an expensive thing to do. It cost me 2 years of my life. I have aged in those 2 years significantly, but it's the first trial of its kind in the world ever. And that's shame. So any pharmaceutical company knows you've got to do this, you've got to put in the hard work, and you've got to build a foundation. Our trial is a foundation. While it will bring benefit, there's more benefit to be had. So we can, after we trial for this, we can actually up the dose, and we can trial the same medication for Schedule 4 and allow doctors to prescribe at a higher level. And we know that it relaxes people, and we know that it changes pain. So that's a second trial that we can run afterwards. So first we deal with mild to moderate pain, which is actually what most people fit into as a category. And second, we go after more intense pain. And we also have the opportunity to use the same medication in a trial for anxiety. And we all know that we all experience anxiety when we experience pain, or we experience stress when we experience pain. And then the next one is to introduce a little tiny bit of THC, because we know that empowers cannabis. It's part of the power behind it. But THC is much maligned, and driving is a concern with THC. So our fourth trial will include a little bit of THC, but with the kind of power that we can give it, that should help significantly with at least pain. And we can start looking at other things that contribute to pain as the disease states addressed by the trial. So beyond that, we start diversifying our trials, and we've got about 20 trials already in the early stages of design. And Nicolette, to speak to your initial introduction of, oh, some of these look like they're a long way off. Yes, of the 20, some of them are a long way off. But the first 3 are within the next 1, 2, and 3 years. So hopefully, by using good science, good engineers, good problem solving, the right approach, and the TGA's extremely generous framework that they've created, we should be able to do something that helps next year. And we'll actually have the product available once we've gotten the trial done. We will make the product available anyway as part of the cannabis products that are out there. So with a prescription, that means you can actually get it within a couple of months.
That's incredible, Peter, and thank you for sharing all of that really rich information, and sort of an exclusive for our community as well. We've got a few questions that are happening in the chat. One of them, is there a link or something that you could provide to us to look at the assessment tool that you're using? Is that possible to share that information with our audience?
Yes, I can't share it right now, but let me say the trial obviously is registered on the ANZ CTR. So that's a public register, anyone can go in there, and the tool is on that trial description, the clinical protocol that's in there and registered. So it's called BPI SF5, and it is an FDA approved pain score. And for the purposes of our trial, there are 4 11-point scales that are all marked and cross-referenced and averaged to give a pain score. You do have to pay for it. So in order for us to use it for the trial, we had to pay a license fee and pay for each form that we were going to use. But I do think there are ways of actually accessing it individually, or for doctors to access it at a less expensive way.
Wonderful. Someone commented, it works, but it's too expensive. So what, do you have an estimate of costs if this gets approved, or an understanding of, how this financially might impact some people who think it works, but they can't afford it?
Okay, at the moment, the treatment that we're looking at costs about $2 a day. And that's still very expensive. It's a clinical trial drug, so not well, not yet mass produced. We have produced quite a lot of it so that we can actually make it available on the market. But as a tablet, it's not terribly complicated to make. And first off, we can make it available in bulk by manufacturing it in the right place at the right cost and take the cost down significantly. One of the things that the health minister asked me to do back in 2018, well, he said, Peter, can you bring in something that's not $600 a bottle for 1 gram of cannabis in oil? And within a couple of months, I had one available for $200. And we've driven the price down ever since. This will be probably the cheapest per milligram of active cannabis available in the marketplace. And we will be driving the price down further.
Exciting stuff. As a pharmacist, I've got a few questions of my own that I'd love to ask you. So one of the things that maybe the general public aren't aware of, we have, specific guidelines that we have to follow to be able to provide someone a Schedule 3 medication, an over-the-counter medication. So would this be indicated for someone with chronic pain or more for a flare-up management? How do you see that sort of playing out, Peter?
In the trial, the way we're doing the treatment is as an adjunct therapy. So people who are on simple analgesia and adding this on to see if it reduces their pain scores. So simple analgesia actually doesn't always mean pharmaceuticals. Simple analgesia includes walking. But most people are taking paracetamol and an ibuprofen, and most GPs are most comfortable prescribing paracetamol and ibuprofen for pain, both of which have their side effects. And this would be something that could be prescribed with or instead of those. Or sorry, dispensed, not prescribed.
Wonderful. And a final question, there's this idea of, or a theory about the entourage effect. And for those at home, it's, a combination of, CBD, THC, and what they call the terpenes, which is like the smell of the cannabis plant. And they think that all of these sort of in combination, the different strains, help to reduce a pain experience. So is this exclusively just CBD, or is it a combination of CBD and different strains or different other molecules? And is there any, evidence around that entourage effect for using medicinal cannabis for pain management?
There's a lot of feedback and observational evidence around the entourage effect. So people will talk about it and they'll talk about their own personal experiences. The personal experience of anyone taking any drug is widely variant. So a person taking paracetamol, one person taking one paracetamol, it can knock them out for 6 hours. And another person taking a paracetamol per day feels no effect whatsoever. So there are wild variances in every drug that everyone takes. So yes, people do experience an entourage effect. But if we look at the medications that have been registered, so Sativex is one of them, Epidiolex is another. Epidiolex is the one that produces results for children with a terrible form of epilepsy. And it was clinically proven to achieve those results without any entourage effect because it uses 2 isolates. In that case, 1 isolate, and with Sativex, 2 isolates. So we know that an effect can be achieved if you give enough of a dose of CBD on its own, the way we are looking at. And we know that if you add THC, that's really boosts up the power. For terpenes and terpene profiles, we're going to have to go through a lot more detail on clinical trials. Those trials will take longer because you've got a number of different molecules that you're trying to prove the safety of. Now, some of them are very simple. Some of them are in grapefruit, some of them are in mangoes, in lemons, and so terpenes and flavorings, natural flavorings exist all around us. Some of them don't have to be proven, but the more complex you make the medication, the harder it is to get a registration for it, because every regulator is very, very, very cautious about what they put their stamp of approval on in case it hurts the public. So the entourage effect, we recognize it is a good thing to have, but not something we're going to try and prove at this stage. We want to get something to the people who need it as quickly as possible.
Peter, I know I've had you in the hot seat for a little bit. We have one more question that I think is a really important one to answer. It's from one of our community members, Kevin. The Faculty of Pain Medicine have sort of categorically stated that there's no scientific evidence for the efficacy of cannabinoids in the management of people with chronic non-cancer pain, and they don't generally recommend it as a treatment option for chronic pain. Do you have any thoughts on that? I've got my own thoughts, but I'll let you do yours.
It's the reason that we're running the trial we're running, to give them the evidence they need.
Yeah. So
we have structured this trial to absolutely give them the evidence that they need to change that statement.
Yeah, wonderful, great. There's a really good statement or phrase, absence of evidence is not evidence at all. So I think that's an important one to see, is when we have an absence of evidence there, we need to be asking more of the questions, having great trials like Promethean BioPharma have put together. Peter, you spoke so eloquently and you have that lived experience as well. So I think everyone can see that your heart's in this for people who are out there who really need support with their pain management and new options and pain changes for themselves. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Jeff is our next speaker. He is Chief Scientific Officer of Painchek Ltd and an emeritus professor at Curtin University's Medical School. He co-invented Painchek and has been recognised with state and national awards for his contributions to pharmacy education, practice and research. He has achieved a vast publication record and substantial grant funding. Jeff is also a passionate surfer, and it's matched only by his dedication to his family. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks, Nicola, for those kind words of introduction. Yes, I'm also a pharmacist, and I'll just share my screen. Apologies, I'm not doing that to start with. So as Nicola said, I'm one of the co-inventors of Painchek, and I'd just like to acknowledge the other two. That's Mustafa T and Kresnik Hodi. I worked for a long time in aged care doing medication management reviews after moving from working in a tertiary hospital, working on a large geriatric ward for a long period of time. And one of the things that I noticed when I went to aged care was there was a huge focus on dealing with behavioural problems in people with dementia. Giving them antipsychotic drugs, giving them benzodiazepines, antidepressants, all around trying to improve their behaviour and with that improve the ability to interact and care with them. But there was limited focus on pain management. And, you know, I sort of had a light bulb moment. And when Mustafa came to see me about doing a PhD, I said, Mustafa, I've got the project for you. We're going to change pain management, improve pain management in people with dementia by improving pain assessment. And why would we want to do this? Well, because pain is very common amongst people with dementia. And it's suggested up to 80% of people who are living in aged care facilities have chronic pain. When you actually look at the literature and you look at the number of people who are actually assessed and identified with pain, it's significantly less than that. But I think the idea that dementia and pain are somehow disconnected is untrue. And similarly so for people who are living in the community, up to 50% of those people will experience pain on a daily basis. And the cornerstone for managing pain is pain assessment. But that can be extremely challenging in people who've got dementia. And it's because people with dementia don't complain about pain that we get this sense is that they're not suffering from it. But it's the symptoms that are associated with dementia, this impaired memory, which impacts on our ability to actually understand what pain is, the word pain. So when I ask someone with dementia, are you in pain? They may not even know what the word pain is, so they just say no. But if we ask them, are they sore? Does it ache? Is it uncomfortable? That's a different event. And this diminished ability to communicate and also behavioural symptoms. And that leads to difficulty in articulating pain experience. But it's not to say that a person who's got dementia isn't suffering from pain. And the consequences of that is caregivers and clinicians may not recognise that despite the fact that I'm not telling you that I'm in pain, I'm having behavioural changes which are my expression of pain. And they may not be correctly interpreted, and as a consequence, we inadequately assess and treat pain. And so that's a really important factor, and that's why we end up focusing on behavioural change and not one of potential antecedents to it, that being pain. So behaviour change is very common in people with dementia, and we've got this understanding that up to 90% of people, as part of their progression of their disease, will have behavioural change. And we've got this terminology that builds it into the vernaculum of people with dementia. Behavioural and psychological symptoms of dementia, BPSD, change to behaviour and psychological symptoms, and unfortunately called challenging behaviours. And they're challenging because when people have aggression, when people are resisting pain, when people are verbally abusive, they are difficult to care for, so they're challenging behaviours. But what we ought to understand that, in actual fact, they're behaviours of purpose. I can't communicate to you in the way that I want to, and I might be thinking I'm going to say something that'll explain what I've got, but my broken brain translates that into other words or actions that make it difficult. And more importantly, we should think about them as responsive behaviours. People have unmet needs, and hence they are acting out their communication. I need your help, and these are the behaviours that they're doing. And when you look at the behavioural and psychological symptoms associated with dementia, I said up to 90% of people suffer them. When you see things like aggression, disruptive behaviours, uncooperative behaviours, sleep problems, inappropriate sexual behaviours, these are things that make it difficult for people to be cared for and often push them into institutionalisation. But we need to take a step back. You know, all of us, when we suffer from pain, have change in behaviour. And the American Geriatric Society back in 2002 came up with a list of the types of behaviours you see in elderly patients with cognitive impairment. And what I've done here is on this side of the slide, I've just highlighted in red all of those which match into pain-related behaviours. So when we see a person with dementia, it may well be the progression is contributing to behavioural change. But at the same time, we need to think about, are there other antecedents? Is the person hungry? Is the person bored? Is the person too hot? Or in many instances, does the patient have pain? And Dementia Support Australia, who are given the responsibility to assist dealing with patients who've got challenging behaviours, who've got dementia, be them in aged care or in the community, find up to 80% of all those people have pain as a potential trigger for their change of behaviour. So what was our aim? We were going to develop a new pain assessment system, all right? And that would include a point of care application, because mobile devices are ubiquitous and they carry with them some great tech. They have inbuilt cameras and they have very high processing ability. So that allows us then to use artificial intelligence to detect facial expression, which are indicative of pain. And the way that the app does this, it finds a face It then landmarks the face, the eyes, the nose, and the mouth, and then looks for muscle contractions in the same way as we look at a person's face, to look for what we call facial actions, which are indicative of pain. But the other thing we know is up to 25% of people who've got pain, particularly people living with chronic pain, when they're at rest, they have a neutral face, a stoic face of pain. And it's not till we move them when we give nociception that we see that facial expression. So in order to look at total pain experience, we need to look at other non-facial features, vocalizations, changes in behavior, changes in activity, and also looking at physical and physiological change. So we do that through a series of digital checklists, and then in real time, the app calculates the pain score and assigns the pain intensity. No pain, mild pain, moderate pain, severe pain. And from that, we can then determine what is the best course of action, although the app doesn't provide that insight. And the other thing what we do is it's a system. So the information on the app, and it operates standalone, can be transferred into a cloud repository and then shared with everyone in real time, the doctor, the nurse, the physiotherapist who's caring for the person in order to decide on what is the best care for that particular case. Now, knowing that real life simulations are problems, I'm actually going to do a demonstration of the app using a video. So this is the dashboard of David Frost, and we've got the pain assessments that have been done. And if this was the real app, I would be able to click on that and it would give me all the components of what's the pain experience in this particular person. This tool has 42 different items, and we need to understand, as Peter said, pain is a personal experience, and different people will experience pain in different ways. We'll have the aggressive, abusive, loud talking person, and we'll have the quiet, introverted person who's sitting in their room, not eating and fading away. Because remember, in dementia, what happens as your dementia gets worse, you don't eat and you become frail and you die. But along the way, you may have forgotten that a person in pain can become frail, not eat and die. So we need to think about that. So we click on this button here, assess pain, and that we then click on pain check. We select whether we want to do it at rest and movement. I'll talk about why we do that in a moment. And then we press start analysis. And in 3 seconds, it scans the face and it detects these facial features. We then move on to the voice. Person's making noisy sounds and groaning and moaning, and their sign. They're also restless and they're touching part of their body. They're confused. And not surprisingly, they're distressed by their pain. They are resisting care. They've had a recent fall, so they've got an injury, and they've got an underlying painful condition. And then we get the result. And we can go back and check each one of these. But this is really interesting because the literature tells us that if you've got 3 or more facial features, which are indicative of pain, you're most likely to have moderate to severe pain. And by using our own data, we've been able to show you that if you've got 2 or more vocalizations, these paralingual vocalizations, I'm sighing, I'm moaning, then the probability, again, is that you'll have moderate to severe pain. So we're telling people, look for signs of pain, look and listen to see whether a person is in pain. So just to give you some history, 2012, Kresnik, Mustafa and I conceptualize what this will look like, and we put in for a grant with Alzheimer's Australia, and they give us $50,000 to create our at that point EPAT, electronic pain assessment tool. And we find in Viso, they're in Switzerland, they specialize in facial recognition analysis, but they've only ever worked with infants. They were looking at facial expression and changing the taste and texture of the baby food and looking to see whether you got happy face or disgust or assumably spitting out, I don't like it. And in 2013, they delivered our prototype. In 2014, we got a startup company, we got investment, and over the next 3 years, we refined our system. We validated Painchek against the ABI pain scale. And in 2016, our startup became a publicly listed company now known as Painchek. And in 2017, we became the first ever pain assessment medical device, which is software, to be regulatory cleared here in Australia and in Europe. And we still are the only regulatory cleared pain assessment device in the world. In September of the same year, Venture Support Australia took up the use of Painchek. And in November of that particular year, we had our first nursing home. In 2019, the federal government gave us $5 million to implement Painchek in aged care facilities here in Australia. COVID slowed that implementation down, but at the moment we have approximately 1,000 aged care facilities here in Australia, the UK, New Zealand, and recently 2 in Canada using Painchek. 70,000 beds, and whilst I say these are aged care facilities, we do have a number of disability, and we also have a number of home care people using Painchek. And to date, over 2 million Painchek assessments have been done, and we train people to do those assessments. So just to give you an understanding of who Painchek Limited are, our purpose is to give a voice to people who cannot verbalise their pain and to allow people who care for them to assess their pain wherever they may reside, whether that be in aged care, in community, or in the acute setting of care. And whilst I talk about us looking after people with dementia, we also have built an app for infants, and our intent is to extend we're just doing work to extend that indication to toddlers. With Telethon Kids Institute here in Perth, we've got a grant to build an app for children with disability who cannot verbalise their pain. And we're working with a consortium of patient advocates, and we've put in a grant to see whether we could build a Painchek for children living with dementia, remembering that 1% of all people globally who have dementia are children. So with that, I thank you for your attention, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions. Thanks, Nicola.
Well, big congratulations, Jeff, because 2012 wasn't that long ago, really, and you've achieved so much with Painchek, and it's really making a difference in aged care facilities in Australia, and such an important thing when we think about the ageing population as well that we do have coming and growing in the Australian population. You touched on non-verbal children, and I was just wondering, have Painchek looked to, I guess, do this in the general population, because a lot of our community invalidated, I guess, or, you know, not even believed about their pain experience, and something like this kind of tool, you could really see it being used, you know, more generally for people who live with chronic pain who are verbal. So can you talk us through that, and if that's something that Painchek is interested in further exploring?
So yeah, so the reason that our focus was on people with dementia and using facial expression in those particular people is that we all have learned behaviours. So at some point in time, for all of us, our parents would have said to you, you're a big boy or a big girl, big boys, big girls, don't cry. You know, and so you'd play football and someone would kick you in the back of the leg, don't cry, because you were told. So our focus is in people who've got dementia. Those learnt behaviours, particularly around facial expression, are lost, and they become more indicative of the presence of pain. I can tell you, when we first started with Painchek, the first piece of research that we did was with a group of 43 people with chronic back pain. And what we did is we got them to self-assess their pain using numerical rating scale, the verbal descriptor scale, and the visual analog scale, and then blinded to us. And then we did their facial analysis. And in those particular people, what we saw was that if they had 3 or more facial expressions, that they were more likely to have moderate to severe pain. and that we had very good sensitivity and specificity, sensitivity between 90 and 95%, and specificity, so true negatives, around 70 to 90%. So we could use the tool, and we have thought about using the tool in people who've got chronic pain. And we've actually just signed an agreement with a group in the United States called Ethos Labs, and they have a set of biomarkers for chronic pain. And we're working with them to establish a tool which would be able to link the Painchek assessment, which may be different to what we have now, with their chronic biomarkers in order to particularly look at the value of devices which are used to reduce chronic back pain. So we are working in that particular space. I can tell you vocalizations as an example. I've got ankylosing spondylitis, and I get flares of extreme lower back pain, made worse by my surfing, but I'm not going to stop surfing, so I don't cry when I surf. And it's really interesting, when my back is really sore, unbeknownst to me, I begin to sigh, right? And my wife hears that, and she cures my back pain for me by saying, can you stop doing that? And so we need to understand that everyone has pain-related behaviours. And we've actually spoken about using Painchek as a way of using a digital diary of people's pain and being able to get an understanding of what that is. Does your pain make you that introverted, anxious person who won't communicate with other people, or does your pain make you angry? And so when people talk to you, you become aggressive. And so from that perspective, yes. And, you know, we've got a lot of things that we want to do, but I think assisting people with chronic pain who can verbalise is certainly on our radar.
Wonderful. It's such good news to hear, and Chronic Pain Australia is very supportive of being involved in any capacity to help support that work. One more question that I might ask you, if you could answer in less than a minute, if that's possible, Jeff. In the early stages of Painchek, what is the most effective way you found to receive feedback from the clinicians who are using it?
In terms of getting, most people, when we introduce Painchek into any aged care facility, we have a customer support person who's with them. So feedback can come directly to that person, or if there's feedback related to Painchek, it can come through our support email, so we can take feedback in that particular way. And we're always happy to take feedback, improve our product. And you'll see on that script I had, on the video, we had the numerical rating scale. That's so that people can have one tool to assess people who are cognitively attacked and those which have got cognitive impairment.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jeff. That was really fascinating, and congratulations on Painchek.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Erin MacIntyre. She's a physiotherapist and PhD candidate at the University of South Australia. She is clinically trained as a musculoskeletal physiotherapist with 7 years of experience working with people who have pain. Her research interests lie in how new technology can be harnessed to improve the quality of life of those who live with pain. And it's great to see a new researcher, I guess, in this space, and be able to see what new innovations and research you've been up to, Erin. So thank you.
Thank you for that kind introduction. I will just share my screen. But yes, thanks for inviting me. As an early career researcher, it's wonderful to be able to have this platform to kind of tell everyone about my research. So today I'm going to be talking to you about how we are using mediated and virtual reality in our lab to reduce people's pain. And today I'm just going to start by going through two different projects, so two different applications of this technology. And then I want to end with kind of what this means for everyone here, people who are experiencing pain, and how you can implement this into your life right now. First of all, I've just got some terminology to go through because I'll be using these terms a fair bit. First of all, we have virtual reality. So VR has been in the media a lot more lately with the metaverse and all of that. That's where you have those big goggles that you wear over your face, and you're completely immersed in a 3D virtual environment. So that environment is computer generated and artificial. It's not the real world, it's a whole new virtual world. In contrast, we have mediated reality. So in mediated reality, we actually take live video or live images of the real world, and then we manipulate or modify those images. So we can make things bigger, we can make things smaller, we can change the colors. But importantly, it's real world, it's the world around you that we're just modifying or changing. And this research kind of really stems from this question: how can we make it easier for people with pain to exercise? And I think this kind of shows my bias. I'm a physiotherapist, and for those people who've been to a physio before, we do talk a lot about exercise and getting people more active. And that's really because we have quite good evidence that for a lot of pain conditions, exercise is really helpful at reducing pain in the long term. However, it's really, really hard for people to get started with exercise. And that's really a huge barrier that we see in clinical practice, that while we know there's really good long-term benefits of exercise, getting people started and engaged is quite difficult. And when we ask people who are experiencing pain, you know, what are the barriers for you to start exercising or getting more active? Three of the common things that we have come up with is, first of all, that it can be quite scary to start exercising and moving again. This is, you know, particularly the case if you've heard, you know, that exercise is bad for you, that's bad for your joints. Sorry, that just popped up. There we go, maybe. Exercise is bad for your joints. Let me just try to get that. Sorry, complete tech meltdown here.
You can see your slides, Erin, or we could see them. So,
okay. Well, yeah. That's good. Perfect. On my screen, everything went black for a second, so who knows? If I go full screen here, can you see that now?
We have a white screen currently.
Oh no, sorry everyone. Let's stop that share, try again. Go here. Are we back on track now?
We've got your email inbox.
Oh no, that's good.
That's the great thing about doing live sessions.
Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. And you know what? I've done so many of these, and it's I've never had something like this pop up before. So my apologies.
There we go. We can see your PowerPoint now, and you got full screen.
Perfect. So sorry, guys. But yes, now that we've got two screens working for me, that's great. So yes. The second barrier for people to start exercising, and this isn't only people with pain, this is definitely myself as well, is that exercise can be really quite boring. It's not always fun, it's not engaging. And of course, things that are boring, we're much less likely to do. And one final barrier that I think will ring true for a lot of people listening today is that exercise can often be quite painful. So while we know that exercise is quite good for pain long term, in the short term, when you're getting started, it can actually make your pain worse, which again is a really big barrier because no one likes to do things that make their pain worse. So I'll just start on the first of two projects where we've used virtual reality as a new treatment for low back pain. And the idea of this treatment is that we want to use gamification of the exercise to make it a lot more fun, a lot less scary, and a lot easier to stick with. And so what we did, we recruited people with low back pain who also had fear of bending forward, so bending their back forward. And we had them undergo an intervention with a physiotherapist where they got to experience 3 different VR games. They got to play those games. All of those games had easy, medium, and hard levels, where the easy levels, you didn't have to bend your back very much to complete. The medium, a little bit more. Hard, you're bending your back a lot more. And so if I play this video here, you'll get to see, first of all, what those games look like from within the VR world. So you can see lots going on, lots of excitement. It's really fun. It's engaging. There's no sound, but in the audio, there's lots of encouraging sounds as well. And you've just seen my colleague there. And so that's what we see when we're watching someone play that game. So you can see in the first clip, he wasn't bending his back very much, but there's certainly some back bending. And then at the very end there, he was kind of bending a little bit more. So the idea was people would be more comfortable bending their back and kind of exploring those new movements when it was with the game, rather than just us as physios kind of telling people to do those movements. And we had good results from this study. So overall, people had less back pain, which is fantastic. But we also had a group of people who had a really big response. So 44% of the people in this study had a greater than 30% reduction in pain over the course of the study, which is fantastic. And even more exciting for an exercise study, we actually found that we had 100% adherence to the program. So everyone came to all the sessions, they finished the study, which is quite rare in exercise programs, because as I said, exercise can be boring, so we often see a bit of dropout. So that was a really cool result. The next study I'm going to talk about is where we're using mediated reality for knee osteoarthritis. And the idea for this study is that we want to reduce people's knee arthritis symptoms, so their pain and their stiffness, so that exercise is easier and a lot less painful. And so the mediated reality, I'll play a video in a second, but what we do is we actually create a visual tactile illusion of someone's knee. So we use that mediated reality system to kind of change the way that their knee looks in a way that is pain relieving. So we actually know that the lab version of this technology can reduce people's knee pain by up to 40% for a short period of time. So generally the effects are short-lived, so about 20 minutes, but we have quite a big pain reduction. And here's what it looks like. So this is a knee stretch illusion, and you can see those are my hands. I'm just gently pulling on someone's leg, but while I'm doing that, the video is kind of lengthening out their knee, stretching out their knee, and now it returns back to normal. And what we find is during that lengthening, that stretching process, people actually feel like their knee pain is kind of easing and going away. It feels like, they're getting more joint space. And that their knee is going to be a lot freer and easier to move, which is really, really cool. And it's a really convincing illusion. I've done it on myself a number of times now, and it's absolutely fascinating how powerful kind of that visual effect can be. And so that lab version works absolutely fantastic, but it's really big, it's bulky, it's difficult for people to use. So when we talk about clinical translation, that lab version was never going to cut it in the real world. So what I've been working on for the last 6 months is we've actually been co-designing a new clinic version of this technology. So I've been talking a lot with people with knee osteoarthritis, with physiotherapists, to come up with a clinic version of this technology, make it so that it's easy for physios to use, that it would be able to fit within a normal session, within a private practice setting, and talking to people with knee osteoarthritis about the design of the program. So again, it's something that they would like to receive as part of their treatment for knee osteoarthritis. So we've come up with a new version of this technology. And now what I'm working on these days is testing if this clinic version is also effective at reducing pain. So watch this space, but again, hopefully that will have the results from that study in the next 6 to 12 months, which I'm really excited about. But that leads me to the end of my presentation, just thinking about what you can actually do today. And the first one I'd say is just start to explore some of the commercial virtual reality games. That first study I talked about with the low back pain, 2 of the 3 games we actually got off the shelf. So you can really use what is available commercially right now. What I would say is just think about, what movements you want to explore, what kind of games do you find interesting, find really fun, because we know that actually sticking with exercise is the important thing. So finding something that you're going to engage with long-term and is the right fit for you is the most important. And a lot of commercial games are fantastic at being a lot of fun and high quality. I'd also say just be curious. You can see when we're using the mediated reality, we're just manipulating kind of visual inputs, how the way that your body looks. Think about how in your life you can, use vision, use, touch to kind of change the way that you experience your pain. So sometimes if you use mirrors to watch movements that normally are painful, they can be a little bit less painful. So just be a bit creative there. And finally, just consider the influence of environment. So that's the thing that we think made the difference for the virtual reality. That virtual environment was really fun, really engaging, really different than our normal environment. And we know that there's lots of contextual environmental influences on pain. So again, you can kind of power up the way that you're moving and you're exercising by considering your environment and just have fun and be curious and explore that. But that's all I have for today. Thanks for listening, and sorry for the tech meltdown halfway through. Bit ironic given what I'm talking about.
Erin, we've got some great questions coming in for you, and that was an excellent presentation, even with the tech meltdowns. Really, really fascinating information. I almost felt like the knee stretching was a bit meditative as well when I was watching it, which was an interesting experience because I didn't think knee stretching would do that to my brain. So what's your challenges in integrating therapy into sort of mainstream healthcare system?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think as with all technology, it's cost and startup costs for implementation. So VR headsets are actually coming down in cost, which is really, really good. And I think that in the next few years, they're probably going to be quite standard across physiotherapy services, kind of like We Fit came out, 10, 15 years ago, and physios, we quickly kind of scooped them up and used them for falls and balance training. That was a nice tool. I think virtual reality is going that way, but there is still a bit of a cost barrier, particularly at an individual level. So while a physiotherapist clinic can probably afford that, on an individual level, it's a little bit less affordable. However, some options for people right now, some of the health insurance practice, they loan out virtual reality headsets for people. And as do some physiotherapy clinics as well. So if you Google kind of VR physiotherapy, you can probably find a VR headset if you want to access that.
Oh, great. You also mentioned that there's some like off the shelf, ready to use, the ones that you used in your trial. What do you know the names of those off the top of your head, or could you provide us with that information?
Yeah, it was Hollow Ball and Hollow Dance, so HOLO ball and then dance were the 2 that we used. But I think with commercial games, it's really just figuring out what the purpose, what you're going to use it for. So we chose those ones because they really encourage people to bend their back forward, which is what we're aiming for in our intervention. If, say, instead you have shoulder pain and you want to work on, practicing lifting your arm above your head, those games probably wouldn't be the best fit for you. Instead, there's kind of VR fishing games that you can play. There's like a Fruit Ninja one where you're kind of a samurai slashing fruit. So that would be probably a better fit for shoulder pain. But it's, again, considering what movements you want to achieve and also what you're going to find fun. I don't love fishing. I probably won't choose the fishing game.
And we've got one more question. I think we've got a little bit of time to answer this one. The people that were included in your trial, were they did they have non-specific back pain? And can you sort of explain a bit about who was recruited, who was excluded?
Yeah, they did have non-specific low back pain. And I'm trying to think. I know that it was weird. We did consecutive sampling from a wait list on a pain clinic. We did end up with a majority male population just because of that consecutive sampling, which may have made a difference in our results because we had quite a few less females than males, which as a woman in science was a bit disappointing, but that's what you do. We did have a massive age range though, which was really fun to see. So I think our youngest participant was in their early 20s and our oldest participant was in their 60s. So we did span a really large age range, which was really cool to see.
Awesome. Well, I think that wraps up our session today. And I just really want to show my gratitude to the speakers, Peter, Jeff, and Erin, for spending some time with us. And also Promethean BioPharma for sponsoring today's session. I think to me, it gives a lot of new interest into not only the tech that's coming out, but it's, you know, about assessments, it's about movement, and also, you know, new treatment options and medications, which is essential for people who live with chronic pain to sort of improve their quality of life. So I hope it gave some of the viewers a bit more hope that there are innovations coming out there, new things on the horizon, and maybe Erin, Peter, and Jeff can keep in touch with us and let us know any developments as they arise as well. That would be wonderful.
Thank you, Nicolette. It was really a privilege and a pleasure.